Hi, Kevin Martin here, your UT admissions guy, here today with Ishika, who is an incoming McCombs class of 2024 freshman. And Ishika, could you introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about your background, who you are, and your decision making for how you ended up at UT Austin?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Ishika. I'm, of course, I just graduated high school. I am from Austin and I'm going to UT Austin. At the end of my college admissions process, I was choosing mainly between Northeastern in Boston, USC in LA, and then obviously UT, and I ended up choosing UT. And I did a few things in high school that kind of led me to be a business major, and I also did apply with pre-med as well. And I talked about that in my essays as well. So I obviously participated in like DECA and then had a few competitive awards there and like leadership roles. And then I started a tutoring business, which I also talked about in some of my essays. And yeah, that's kind of the main part of like being a business major is like that experience. And then I had an internship with a chemical manufacturer one summer, or like the summer after freshman year. So yeah, those were like the big things on my resume.
Cool. And what was I remember we talked a lot about ultimately narrowing it down between these three options, and you can, if you want to share a little bit about applying to UT BHP and how that factored into your calculus, and what the offers were at USC, and how you ultimately decided like which school to, because I know it was quite close. So if you could share a little more about that process of decision making.
Yeah, it was a really hard decision to make. I literally, um, so the first thing is I really had to think about the finances because I'm going to med school, or I was planning on going to med school. I'm obviously undecided now, but I was planning on it when I applied. So I applied to places I knew that I could get scholarships to. And I know USC gives out like a ton of merit scholarships, and then Northeastern is good for merit aid as well, and then UT was in-state. Um, and so when I applied to USC, I applied kind of early so that I could do the merit scholarship deadline. And so then if you are nominated for one, you fly out to LA, they interview you. And after they interview you, they give you an offer about like a month-ish later. And then Northeastern, it's kind of, I applied early action, and they just, whenever they roll out decisions, they give you a scholarship. So for USC, I got the half tuition, which I think is called, yeah, it's called presidential. So that's half tuition. And then for Northeastern, I got an honors, dean's honors or something like that. And it was essentially 30-ish grand a year, something around there. And then UT was in-state. So they were pretty comparable in terms of price, which was really like a good, chip off my shoulder because that was like the number one thing. So that was the first kind of criteria that a school had to meet. And then as I started looking more into it, I decided kind of halfway through the admissions process, I kind of decided that maybe I didn't want to do medicine. And so I was looking into a lot of the rankings. And so USC and UT are both they're really good in rankings, honestly. Northeastern trails a little bit. So that was definitely another factor that I considered because I was considering investment banking. And so investment banking is really, to get to like the top firms, they recruit a lot of times from these colleges that are highly ranked. So I did look into it pretty thoroughly, and Goldman essentially, like, they'll look at like Columbia, they'll look at like UT and USC, but they look at those like big name schools because they want in bankers from those high ranking institutions. And so Northeastern just kind of trailed a little, in all honesty. And so that was kind of one of the main criteria. Also, another thing, I know that probably people who are, spending their time watching this kind of video are very qualified academically. And so obviously college is a lot about, gaining experience in your career field and, getting an education. But it's also a lot about the experience. And Northeastern has a co-op program, which is awesome. Like, it's definitely amazing for the people who want to go out and get experience. But when I looked into it, it could be a little bit kind of, like it's a little different than your regular college experience because when you do co-ops, you're like in and out of school basically. And so a lot of the times you'll be in and out of school with your classmates. So like you're not necessarily going to have school at the same time that your friends do. And then a lot of people take 5 years to graduate. Like Forbes posted the 4-year graduation rate for Northeastern was 0%. And when I saw that, I was
Oh,
like, I
wow.
don't,
I
yeah,
didn't actually know that. So almost everyone that goes, pretty much everyone that goes to Northeastern finishes in 4.5 or 5 years.
yeah.
Wow.
And
Okay. That does make a big difference because if you're talking cost of attendance and you're having to budget in another 30,
exactly.
$40,000. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that was like another big thing is too is cost, and also, I mean, it's kind of it's not the same as USC and UT in terms of student life. Like USC and UT are, big party schools, like, big football games, like tailgates, all this really big stuff. And I grew up with that, like I'm from Texas, I'm from Austin, so like I go to UT football games, and like growing up with that kind of like sports culture, I think it would just be really hard for me to go from having all of that to having none of that in Boston.
Mm.
Also, weather. That is something I think so many people do not consider. Is like, especially, I'm assuming a lot of people who apply to UT are from Texas, but like this isn't just applicable to UT, but like just when you're thinking about where you want to go to college, just factor in weather, because I think a lot of people don't consider that those places are like get like negative, like into the negatives
And
in
it
winter.
snows like 2 or 3 months, like full on,
Yeah,
and it's cool for like the first day or two. And then you're like, this is miserable.
yeah, and like I like cold weather, and I don't think I could move to Boston anymore. I didn't get to visit because of COVID, which is so annoying. But yeah, I agree. Like it's snowing all the time, and it takes a certain type of person to deal with that. So yeah, that was another factor. My mom really did not want me to go to the East Coast. She was like, "It's too cold," and I was like, "You know what? You might be right." So that was another thing. So that kind of was how I went about my decision process with Northeastern. USC and UT were very like that was kind of that was the hardest decision I've ever had to make, and I think what kind of tipped me to UT, there was a few things. So it's kind of specific to me, but I'm just going to share it because you should look into this before you're deciding. So there was a co-op program at UT called UTNY, and it's basically where you spend a semester or a summer in New York, working, living, and studying. It's like that's like their catchphrase or whatever. So
Is
basically,
it a
you take a
semester or a year program, that one?
semester, so you can do
Semester.
it either a semester or a summer. Yeah.
Yep.
And that honestly, like, okay, so after you do that, like, I think that's a really good experience because, like, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, UTNY is basically like it's a co-op program where you go to New York for a semester or summer. And considering like I wanted to do investment banking, a lot of so there's like a few key cities for finance, and when you go to New York is like, or NYC in particular, New York City is like the hub of finance, and really it's very diversified in the investment banking industry. So like you can do basically any type of field, banking for any type of field. Whereas like if you do something in Houston with investment banking, you're going to be centered around gas. If you do something in LA with investment banking, you're going to be centered around film. And so that program and another program called Wall Street for McCombs, which is like a kind of a pipeline to
Mm.
New York, that kind of tips the boat for me for UT over USC, because the recruitment numbers are honestly very similar for UT and USC. And like it was kind of like what best fit like what I wanted to do in the future, like what was going to get me to where I wanted to be after the 4 years, not just during the 4 years. Because the student life and academics were so similar at the two locations that even like the cities, like LA and Austin are very similar. LA is probably a higher price point and maybe a little bit more traffic. But other than that, really like the colleges themselves, the 4 years were probably not that big of a disparity. It was mainly what was going to happen after. And I think when I started thinking about that, that was when I shifted to UT.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
thanks for sharing. And it's interesting to hear your perspectives on both universities now from when we last spoke back in the fall when you were starting the application process. And it's I like the points that you raised because the college search like continues even after, and especially after you've gained your admissions decisions and scholarship offers, because then it's not hypothetical; it's a concrete thing. You can assess exactly how much you can project to spend for, 4.5 years of an education. And so the things that you're mentioning to me now, if I recall, like they didn't really even come up in your essays, right?
No, not at all. No.
Yeah. And so it's cool to hear that like it's just this continually evolving process. And I think one advantage of UT, and of course USC has the same advantage, especially if you're on a scholarship, is there's so many programs and such a wide variety of things that you may not even know. Do you remember what you talked about in your original first choice major short answer? Like what your dream job was?
Probably plastic surgeon.
Yeah, that's what you wrote
Yeah,
about.
I
Yeah,
remember that, of course. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I
I mean,
think
I'm not off the med track completely, but I'm still like I'm leaning towards finance.
sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember, I think you wrote on your BHP essay also about like how plastic surgery is still male dominated, even though like most recipients of plastic surgery are female. Um, yeah, so it's interesting, and I have a feeling that this process of evolution and exploration is probably going to continue. That's one really fun thing about college. You just get bombarded with all of this stuff and new people and interesting courses and things like that you just didn't even know existed. And so maybe we could like watch this 2 years from now or like record you again, like once you start doing the internship recruitment process for the big financial firms and see if you're
Yeah.
still there. Cause a lot of students want to go to finance. And so it's good to hear that you've, really done some research and, tried to make an informed decision because this is obviously a big step and a large crossroads, especially with COVID. I have to imagine like staying in Austin, would that factor into your decision? Like with the pandemic and it's like March, April and
Oh, yes. Okay, so that's another thing. COVID really played a role in my decision because first I was supposed to visit Boston in at the end of March. So like the last few days, it was like honors welcome day. And I obviously didn't get to, which really sucked. And my friend who goes to Northeastern, she's literally the reason I applied. She said that visiting campus was what sold her on the college. So not having that experience, having it could have reaffirmed or contradicted my
mm,
decision. And it sucks, but it was the circumstances. Honestly, I did a virtual tour. But honestly, after seeing a lot of the things that I researched, just from my standpoint, it just wasn't a great fit anyway. But USC also, I did visit obviously when I interviewed, and it was like it was their selling point, right? They were like trying to get us to go and everything, and it was great. I really loved campus is awesome, but like you visit in like the end of Feb and you're making your decision in like April. It's like I didn't fully remember everything that happened. Like obviously I took pictures and videos of campus, but I couldn't remember everything. And so they were supposed to have another welcome day at the end of April that you could go to for admitted students. And again, I couldn't go because of COVID. So I don't know if that would have changed my decision. I mean, there's no way to tell now. Also, another thing is like I didn't want to if knock on wood it doesn't, but if like fall semester gets canceled for freshmen or for everyone, but for the people who are about to move out, like it would really suck to pay out of or private tuition for something that's like not um for something like you're taking at home that I could have taken through like community college, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was another thing is like I don't know exactly when we're going to be going back, and I don't know if I want to, I don't know. It was a lot to consider with the circumstances, but yeah.
yeah, that sounds like I think a lot of students and families are going to be less have a less appetite for risk, and so moving that far away from home, or I don't know if you're planning on living on campus or off campus, but I know a lot of especially returning out of state or out of Austin students like getting locked into 12-month leases and just not knowing what the situation is going to be like. I know UT, it's still really evolving. I know they're intending to restart classes in the fall. I've seen a lot of different proposals. I think they're still trying to figure it out as they go. And I think for me, it's been interesting. I think if I was a student, it would be interesting to watch like, or you see like this world made up of adults and like professionals, and like just nobody has any idea what's going on. Like nobody knows what to do. There is no playbook for this. And so on the student end, like you're the one that's like, taking on a lot of this risk because if you're paying out of state or private tuition, even after a scholarship, like you don't want to be locked in. And so, it's interesting. I'm sure there's many, tens of thousands of students who their calculations have changed radically in the last few months. And so, Yeah, it sounds like you've probably done the right thing, but you had like an opportunity of riches because like you had USC, Northeastern, UT. It's like that's like kind of dream. So that's a really good problem to have. But I'm glad that you still took it really seriously and went about it like an informed consumer. You know.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's another thing. Like the economic state of America. Like there's no telling where this is gonna go. Like there's no telling when we're gonna get a vaccine. Like the ambiguity of whatever, however you say that, ambiguity
Yeah.
of all of it was really it was also like very like yeah, keeping what's it called, costs to a minimum. Like there wasn't that much of a disparity, but there was still a disparity between UT and USC, which you have to consider. So like not putting yourself into debt. A lot of people gave me that advice. They're like, do not put
Yes.
yourself into debt, no matter what you do. So that's another thing.
I think
That's
that
why
was probably
finances were really.
my advice too. I'm like, don't like, especially for an undergraduate degree. It's funny, you know, I had, I don't remember, say, I think about 30 students admitted to UT this year. And I think 26 of them chose to enroll at UT Austin. And these are students that have offers from all over the country, you know, your Berkeley's in Michigan and Vanderbilt and all of these schools. I think I've one at MIT, one who's going to Vanderbilt, one at USC who did the presidential scholarship. And that's pretty much it. So even when you're forming the college list, like you didn't have a particularly crazy college list. Where all did you apply?
I had a like list and then I threw it away.
That's okay.
Okay.
Just roughly.
Yeah, I'll do off the top of my head. So I applied to UT, obviously USC Northeastern, UCLA, Berkeley, um, UCSD, UC Santa Barbara, uh, Georgetown, um, Princeton, and I know there's more. I really can't think of it. Let me think. uh, sorry, I'm like
That's
blanking.
okay. No, I don't mean to put you on the spot. No, I just was getting a general idea of the list. Did you get into LA and Berkeley? Can you remind me? I don't.
I got into all the yeah.
You got into all the UCs, and that wasn't, you didn't really consider that in this kind of top three, or was there any scenario where you could imagine going to Berkeley or Los Angeles?
So Los Angeles, honestly, probably not. But I applied because it was like my dream school since I was like 12, and I knew I would be mad at myself if I didn't.
Yeah,
But like
sure.
honestly, like they don't have like an actual like I would have to be doing business econ, which isn't like necessarily like the same as doing like a finance degree, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
So like I don't know. That was also UCs are very like they're honestly very similar to UT, like very comparable in terms of like, I mean, UCs are ranked a little bit higher, sure. But like in terms of like what you're paying, it's like, especially with, the economic state right now, like, I don't know if it's going to go down or up after the vaccine comes out, like whatever's going to happen. I don't think I would want to pay out of state tuition for something that like UT could give me. You know what I mean? Also, another thing that factored into my decision is USC is very like, like networks are regional, right? So like UT is like very like much southern, and then USC is very much on the west coast. And I used to love LA. Like I grew up like fantasizing about moving there, like to California when I was older. But like when I visited this time, honestly, I didn't like it that much, and I just realized it's kind of a less. It's like Austin, but more traffic and more like costly.
They have the
So I don't
beaches,
know.
I guess, but
Yeah, okay, that's another thing, but honestly, like, USC, like, is in, like, a not near a beach.
yeah,
You
it's
have
like
to
an hour or more drive away from the coast, right?
yeah, to get to, like, Santa Monica, there's, like, a train that you can take directly, but I think it's, like, 30 or 45 minutes, and, like, I don't know, I mean, anyways, the beaches are obviously really nice, but, like, anyways, I think Austin's where the heart is for me. But, yeah, and I also talked to my BHP interviewer on the phone when I was making my decision, and he was like telling me so he's an investment banker in New York, so he was like a
Oh,
good
cool.
person to talk to, and so he basically told me that where he works, his bank, like he doesn't meet very many USC alums. He meets mostly like UT, like Longhorns. He was like, I've seen like a good amount of Longhorns, but I don't see that many Trojans. And he was like, that may be because USC is like dominates the West Coast. And so that makes also a difference in terms of like if you want to move to the East Coast versus West Coast and where your college is located, sometimes it might not be the best fit. So that was another
Yeah,
thing.
that's a really good point to bring up when students are applying to universities. I think in especially your kind of Midwest schools, where unless you want to live in Chicago, for example, like
Yeah.
it's just your opportunities are going to be slightly more restricted. And yeah, so it's something to sort of, it's this balance between not wanting to plan out 5 or 10 years ahead and like have your whole life ahead of you, but it's good to sort of have this idea. And then with an internship with the UT in New York, you can see if like the weather is for you, or if you can like manage the cold, and because there's nowhere in the world like New York, and so if you can, if that's where you
Yeah.
need to be, then you can put up with the cold. But if you have options elsewhere for your undergraduate studies, then it's good to have those things in mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to talk about BHP at all? I know like you had yeah, kind of a frustrating like experience. I was frustrated for you if you weren't also. Do you want to talk
Yeah.
about your stats a little bit? Like everyone always wants to know, like what are your grades? Like what is your ACT and all that? Because like
Yeah.
everyone's gonna ask.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start with stats. So I got a number of fives on my AP test. I don't know if they look at that. My ACT was a 34, not super scored. UT doesn't super score, right?
No,
Okay,
never.
super scored is like a 35, but like I only think I set them one. My GPA was around, when I applied, it was around a 5.7 weighted and then a 4 unweighted. And then when I applied, I think I was ranked fourth.
Fourth,
So
you're like top 1%. You had, how many kids in your like 600 or 700 graduates?
650-ish.
650. Yeah. So you were top 1%. So you were within the academic range of business honors, right? Like you were
Yeah. No,
competitive.
so I don't know if I actually told you this, but I talked to the BHP sophomore recruiter. Did I tell you about that? Like the BHP.
You, no, tell me your experiences there, and we can circle back to the interviewer too if you want to talk more about that experience.
Yeah, so basically I talked to this guy who was like a BHP recruiter or whatever, and he was telling me how he said this like came straight from the advisors. He said they didn't want to admit people who wanted to run their own medical practice in the future. He said that like that was like a big like disclaimer for them. He said that people who were like doing pre-med in BHP were doing like med tech or like healthcare consulting or something like that. Like he said that there wasn't many. So basically, I mean, I wrote most of my essays basing it like
Yeah,
focused,
yeah, that's frustrating. Okay, yeah.
and I know that they definitely deliberated on my application. So I honestly think like maybe maybe that was why. I mean, you can't really say like that was why, but like just to get an idea. But anyways, so I have finished applying like November 1st. You have to do the first one, I think, for BHP. They recommend it, which basically anything that you hear that's recommended is required. And yeah, like when I applied to Georgetown, they're like, oh, we recommend like 3 subject tests. And I went to my interviewer, and the lady was like, "Did you take any?" And she was like, "Yeah, Or I was like, "I've taken a few." And she was like, "Okay, well, even though it says recommended, they mean that you need to take them because it like shows that you like care more about their school and they care about like fit and stuff." But anyways, so yeah, for UT we applied the first one. There's an extra essay for BHP, and then after you apply, they reach out to you via email and they are like, okay, here's your interviewer. They'll be emailing you soon. So I got mine in like beginning of November, no, end of November, beginning
Probably
of
like
December.
beginning of December. I think you were in that first wave of interviewed people.
Yeah, yeah. I think I was like in that first week. It was pretty soon after I submitted. And so the guy like emailed me. He was like, hey, like, are you free tonight? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so we just spoke on the phone. It was like I mean, I don't know how, I don't want to say this is like for all interviews, but my interviewer was like awesome. He was very like chill. And he was just like trying to get to know me and see like where I was headed, what I wanted to do with BHP and that kind of thing. And so yeah, then after you have your interview, they like submit an evaluation for you, and then maybe like 2 months later ish. Oh wait, no, they give the first round or they have to give you your decision by Feb 1st, I believe, and they're supposed to do that. But then this year they decided to defer all the admissions, so I don't really know what was happening, but they basically deferred it for a month or something like that. And yeah, that was about it. They interview you and then if so, I think I don't know what percentage of people get interviewed, but I know that if you get interviewed, you have a 50% shot of getting in or something like that. That's like what the numbers.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
that's usually about right. I think about a quarter of all applicants get interviews, and then half of people interviewed will end up gaining admission. So it's like 2,000 apps, like 500 interviews, and like 250 admits, something roughly like that.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, that was a bit frustrating, but yeah, that
Yeah,
was
because I remember you had reached out to them a few times because it's like, well, if you haven't heard back, like you may as well just send the director an email. I'm glad you got that feedback because your application was honestly like a bit of a mystery. I think 6 clients this past year that got into BHP, and like you were like number 2 like on my ranking of clients, and I just was like, you're definitely going to get it. I just couldn't see why. And that's just so annoying to like, oh, you want to be a medical entrepreneur, and that you just like, and that I had no idea that that is like some weird bias within BHP
yeah,
because
no, it was
it,
unpredictable.
yeah, in both of our minds, it's like, oh, this is going to be a really cool application. Like you like want to do like you've done great in your medical, like your science classes, like you've done relevant activities in both business and science at school. Like let's just combine the two, and
Yeah,
yeah, that's just and then obviously like you change your mind, it's just in hindsight if you just gone like just straight finance, like just the really conventional like general like let's just take the
I know.
conservative like that's really and honestly like that's kind of a miss on like BHP's part because like you're an awesome student and like obviously BHP is a lot of awesome students, but like you're really articulate. So like if BHP's out there and they're watching this video, I'll be like, you can hear straight from me, like you're missing out on a really my other clients who got in are also like tremendous students, right? And just really nice people. But yeah, you're every year when I work, like there's always mysteries that cannot be explained on both ends. Like students I thought were going to get in that didn't, either to honors or regular, and students that did get in that I'm like I didn't really see that coming, and you were definitely like the unfortunate kind of mystery of like
Yeah.
I thought I just it's just a bummer because I know your interviewer was like really big on you, and did they say that did they message as well to be like, hey?
Yeah, they like were very supportive. So after I interviewed that, or after they interviewed me, they like I sent them a thank you email. They were like, "Yeah, just submitted your evaluation, whatever." And then I reached out to them again like a few months later, and they like were like, "Okay, just call me. We can like talk for a few minutes." And I think I've talked to him like 2 or 3 times since the interview, just for advice, like with my college decision and like the deferral stuff and like just everything. Like he's been really, really helpful.
Yeah, so let's circle back. Let's talk about the essays. So talk about your drafting process and kind of how you approach the essays and uh, yeah, just your process and how you got started.
Okay, so I basically started my essays, I want to say, like the week after AP exams of junior year. So it was literally like this time of year last year. And I literally made a list on my phone. I think it was called like college essay ideas or something like that. I can't find it now. But I basically just bullet pointed like specific things in my life and like even just like everyday life or when I was like thinking about it when I'm driving or something um like just write it down after or something. And like there's a lot of like stuff that you forget that you've experienced. Like, there's just like sometimes there'll be like something that happens when you're little and you'll go back and be like, oh yeah, that happened. And like if you just like start like a place like in your notes on a Google Doc or like even just like a notepad or something, and you just keep track of like those things as they come to you. And a lot of times if you're like in the heat of the moment and you have like a spark, or something like that, like just start typing it out in notes. Like I have some essays that I just have like I started them on notes and I finished them in a Google Doc because I was like walking to class. Like it doesn't have to be like a sit down. If you try and sit down and write it, it honestly might not come out as great as if you have like a moment of, like eureka moment or whatever. So like something, just keep in mind that like it doesn't have to be like it's not going to be like super like it doesn't have to use huge words. It just has to be really about you. And so that's what I tried to like capture when I was making my list is I like tried to think back, what have I like done in my life that's like shaped who I am, as dumb as that sounds, but like you know what I mean, like just go back and think about, and I tried to like blur out the I won this and this, and I did this and this, and I was, you know, president of this and like whatever. Like I try to think about like personal experiences because I don't want to write something that they just like, you know, see in my resume. I wanted to write something that like adds depth, if that makes sense. And so yeah, that's how I started that. And then so I would just type whenever I wanted to, whenever I felt like it. And then I think in English last year, like the last week of school, our teachers had us like sit down and write like a few drafts. And those are probably like some of my least productive times because I just couldn't, like I couldn't
Yeah.
just, you know, start drafting if I didn't feel it, you know. So just drafting whenever you like have a moment and then putting it all together. And after I came up with my list of ideas and I wrote a few, you know, drafts or whatever, I tried to follow through and finish them out. And like just flesh it out, like just keep going with your ideas, just keep writing. You can always edit out, but if you don't write something down, you're probably gonna forget it.
Yes.
And so I think like my first few, like one of my first drafts was probably like 1,000 words, and that was like way too long, obviously. But like it was good because it's easier to cut stuff out than to add to. So that was like one of my things. And so after I wrote like 6 or 7 essays, I started. And also another thing is like even if you start an essay, that doesn't mean you have to finish it. Like it can just be like a small like I thought this was a good idea, but then it didn't turn out to be. So like that can be another thing. But you should at least like try it. And then so I read about 6 or 7, and then yeah, that was and then I tried to like cut down whatever I didn't want and like the stuff I didn't want to talk about. And then I think we had a conversation that was just like, okay, I really don't know how to pick this which one like to go with, and you were like, just go with like what you feel like speaks the most to you and what you want to write about, and then that's what I ended up doing. And if you do that, then you're going to end up writing an essay that reflects who you are. So don't just try to show off. Like that's what your resume is for. Your essays are like supposed to be about you.
Yeah, that's a lot of really awesome points, and I appreciate you breaking it down step by step. And I think sincerity and authenticity are just critically important when adults or teachers or admissions counselors talk about wanting to get to know you and hear your voice. That's what they mean. And if your essays are reading like a Wikipedia entry, for example, or like the Wikipedia of your resume, it's going to fall flat. It's not going to be memorable. I really liked the piece of advice you gave at the beginning. That's not a frame of reference I had considered directly, but it gets to the root of the creative process. This like shower thoughts idea of how you have insights, and as you're saying, you're just driving like those moments where your mind isn't as busy, like you're doing your cross country run or your dance practice or whatever it is, and even just like literally putting it down on your phone and like putting those bullet points. Oh, like that one time on that one family trip, or oh, there was that one moment in class, or oh, at the DECA competition, and I like my laptop died or something. And these can often be the essence of really awesome essays. And I remember specifically with your drafting, you embraced this approach that I've tried to get all of my clients to do, and I've only been able to get about a third of them to do it. And the advice is ignore the essay prompts. Like, don't worry about what is my first choice major, or like what is like my life story in 700 words. It's just ignore the prompts, ignore the word limits, write what you want to write. I think you were the perfect example of this. Of we had like 6 or 7 essays, like 3 or 4 of them were sort of like these kind of nuggets of like, I don't really know what to do with it. And I think your SAA, we sort of just like put a bunch of it together. Like we sort of picked and chose the best parts. And so it ended up being this like super cool, and I've published your essays on my website. So like applicants can see them. And just the creative process behind it, instead of just seeing like the end result where it is this like you have 4 really dynamic like interesting essays, all of them tell an interesting story, they offer different dimensions to who you are, but that didn't come from a vacuum, right? Like we started with, I don't know, probably over 3,000 words worth of stuff when it was all said and done. And it was like, did you find that doing all of that work and effort in the beginning made the like second and third and fourth steps of the essay writing process like a little easier and a little more smooth?
Somewhat, yeah, because I think honestly, even if you don't end up using the essay that you wrote, you know, about whatever irrelevant topic you decided to cut out, it's also like just gaining the skills of like learning how you want to present yourself to the admissions committee through your writing. And a lot of times that can come from just practicing, like practice makes perfect, like just writing it out and like saying, okay, why didn't I even like this in the first place? And then figuring it out like that. And then what did I actually like this? What did I actually like about this? And then carrying like the things that you learned about your own writing into those future steps can help too. I think,
Absolutely. And that brings up a few good points as well, because, kind of like with the BHP interview, it can be very intimidating to people. And it's like, no, like this doesn't have to be an intimidating process of going to the dentist and getting your teeth pulled out. It can be fun. You just never know what's going to happen. And if you can find a way to channel this gatekeeper process of college applications into something that's introspective or creative or productive, it could even be fun. I feel like with your essays, they were just like, they were fun. Like you could see, like as you were writing, you're like, oh, I'm like talking about what I want to talk about. And even I think your leadership essay, for example, could you talk a little bit? Do you remember what you wrote for your leadership short answer?
yeah, so I think I talked about one of my friends was really struggling as our pitcher, and
In
it was kind of,
softball, right?
yeah, yeah. I used to play softball. It was kind of a spin on like the traditional, like, like we lost all the games and then we started winning because we didn't start winning after. So like,
You just lost all the games.
yeah, really like that's really rough. But yeah. So I talked about basically one of my friends was a new pitcher and she didn't start pitching until her second. So softball season's in the second semester and she didn't start pitching until second semester, so she was really struggling with the skills, and like she was like not receiving any support whatsoever from our team. And like it was you know you, very, when she would pitch, like it would be like quiet, like there was nobody yelling anything. And then basically I hurt my ankle and was sitting the bench a few weeks into season, and basically I just like I perceived like that the support that she was lacking could have really helped like elevate her skills. I don't know. And so basically I just started cheering for her, and then like everyone else followed suit, and then just started like helping, like offering to like catch for her during warm-ups and stuff like that, like just small things that like you don't really like think about, but like when you actually do them it can like really help someone. um so yeah, that was another thing, like I didn't necessarily like that happened freshman year, and I wasn't like, like a freshman isn't going to be like team captain or anything. So that was another thing, is like it doesn't have to be like I was president of Key Club and I hosted this event, this event, this event. Like it can be small things that you did that just show who your leadership style. Like, yeah, I forgot that was an essay question, but yeah.
Yeah, I that's why I asked in particular, because you had an extensive resume and we haven't talked that much about it, and which I appreciate. In your essays, you did sort of integrate some of these, I did this at DECA kind of stuff. But I think students I see can get caught in this box of limiting their possible essay choices to what they think admissions counselors want to hear. Sometimes, like with the case of BHP, you might just get unlucky and you just didn't know that they weren't looking for medical entrepreneurs or something. And it's not to be scary or anything, but for these really specialized programs, they are looking for a specific fit. But if you can, especially in the regular admissions process, break out of that mold a little bit and highlight a part of your resume or life that the reviewer would have never paid any attention to, because like softball you did it freshman year and like it was just this kind of blip on the radar, but here you're framing this activity not as like, as you say, I'm this superstar teammate and I've scored all of the runs and like never made an error. And I think that sort of showcases different aspects of your personality that are getting to something a little bit deeper, because a student like yours, your academics and your resume kind of speak for themselves, right? Like you're academically excellent, your resume was really strong, and so I appreciated in your applications, and I'm sure that's what appealed to USC and Northeastern as well, that you got outside the box a little bit. You broke this, very well trotted college admissions script, and were willing to, take some chances and share some interesting stories. And at the end of the day, that's what admissions viewers want to see, because they're reading like dozens of these things a day. So if you can sort of break the monotony a little bit, uh, and all of your essays certainly did that, then it can lead to favorable outcomes.
Yeah, and like you said, like I mentioned like some of, the achievements. Like it doesn't like say you are like Key Club president, like you can talk about, say you like hosted a Relay for Life at your school, like you should talk about that if it was meaningful to you. But like I'm trying to say like don't like on your resume you already like put like bullet points like I did this, I did this. Like if you just list that out in paragraph form, they're not really they don't they've already seen that. But yeah, like you were saying, like trying to paint it in a new like take something that's already on your resume and then paint it in a new picture. Is really what they're looking
Yeah,
for.
for sure. And another pitfall I see students make is they'll focus exclusively on the same activity. So their leadership short answer is about like the club they founded, and their major short answer is about the club they founded, and their enrich the learning environment short answer is like some aspect of the club they founded. And it's like if that's the only thing you've done and you've got to rest on it and you can't think of anything else, then like go for it. But if you have, like you say, a variety of different activities, use those short answers to portray different dimensions of your personality. Could you also speak a little bit about how or if you used some or all of your UT application items? Because you had SAA, the three short answers, you had the BHP essay. Did you use any of that stuff for like the California Insight questions or the USC supplements or even like some of those Princeton short answers?
Yeah, so my main essay, like Common App essay, that one was basically my SAA, but I just cut down like 100 words.
Yep.
Because honestly, like once you work on a long essay, it's really like the supplements. Like you just kind of want to clear the Common App essay like out as fast as you can, and then just start working on your supplements because those add up like a lot quicker than you think. And
Yeah, it's super time consuming, and so many students like they're like, I'm going to apply to 20 schools, and then that list gets like considerably smaller as October and November, and the reality of just having to do all of these little essays for these top 50 universities is just a massive headache.
yeah, it is a lot, and I think repurposing your essay can be really, really helpful. Like the UCs, I actually don't know if I used that much, but I know like Common App I definitely did, and then USC supplements. Although like why USC, why this school, whatever, I just rewrote those because I was like. Also, another thing with those essays is I actually kind of liked them. A lot of people hate them, but I liked them because I'm like that type of person who will just or at the beginning of the application process, I was the type of person who would just apply somewhere to apply somewhere. But writing those essays was like, okay, do I actually want to go to this school
Mm.
or am I just applying because it's highly ranked? So like forcing yourself to look into like what this college like stands for, the programs that they have, the opportunities that they have, like am I a good fit for this school? Because writing that essay is not just for them to see that you're a good fit, but it's like, do I see myself fitting in there? And I think that is probably why I ended up loving USC because I wrote that essay and I was like, okay, you know what? I could see myself here. And so that was really it was a good essay for me to write for most of my schools. And then like some of them, like I don't know if I should say, but a school in Chicago I was looking at had a why us essay, and I looked at their school and I went, you know what, not you. Like I was like,
Probably
no,
not. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna swipe left.
yeah, exactly. And I was like, okay, sorry, but like yeah, so it was a good one. But those I rewrote. A lot of honestly, like quite a few of them asked for, I think leadership or like when did you like, yeah,
Like
leadership ones.
describe an extracurricular, I think is a pretty
Describe
common one.
an extracurricular that you like learned something through or like something like that. And then some of them can be really, really vague. Like one of them was literally like, tell us something you don't know, or tell us something we don't know about you. And I was like, okay. So I just used one of the ones I had already written because I was like, this is like a pretty good representation of me. But yeah, it really depends on most of them. I think you can reuse if you write enough. But some of them, like the why us essays, you kind of have to just work with the school.
Yeah, I love your point about the why us. And again, it's this idea that college applications can be an opportunity for discovery and introspection. And I've had students who will come to me and they'll say, hey, Kevin, like, I just don't know what to write about for why I want to apply to like this Christian university or out of state school. And I'm like, well, if you
Yeah.
can't find any reasons, then like maybe that's a signal that you shouldn't be applying there, or you're already applying to 10 other schools. And this might be a good indication that you can leave this one off the list. Because if you can't even find 300 words about why that university or campus interests you in a way that's unique on your college list, then maybe it shouldn't be on the college list. I had one this year. It was like a practicing Hindu student applying to a Christian university in Texas, and he was really struggling with like writing a there's like commentary on this Bible quote, and he's like, I don't know what to say, and I'm like, I don't really know either. And I was like,
Yeah,
maybe you should talk to your parents about this one. And he did. He came back. He's like, I don't think I'm going to apply there. I'm like, yeah, that's probably a good signal. Like if that is on the front end what they're expecting from you, then you can imagine the campus experience may not be in your best
yeah.
interest. Yeah.
And
So,
I had a similar experience with Pepperdine because I love
mm,
location, beautiful location. But I looked into the school, and this again, this is like the why us essay. Like I had to look into this. They had like one that was like right about like something something having to do with religion. I just remember that. And I looked into their school and I was like, So I went on YouTube and I watched it. Oh, yeah. And so she was like a transfer student from like a community college. And basically she was like, you have to go to 14, you have to like visit church 14 times for one semester or something like that. And I was like, okay, maybe not. But yeah, just like looking into the school and seeing what they stand for, that's big. But yeah.
yeah, as well. I think sometimes students will. It goes both ways. Like I think SMU, for example, Southern Methodist is a good example of a fairly secular school. But there's others like Baylor, where like the religious creed is like tied inextricably to the curriculum, to the professors, to the campus life, the sorts of students it attracts. And so, yeah, I'll get college lists sometimes from students, and I'm like, you've literally just picked randomly at like the top 20 U.S. News Report business schools, and like I can see that you've just picked randomly because there's a few schools on here that like you know just can sort of see up front that like may not be the best fit for you either academically or you've told me you don't want to go to a cold school, so like why are you applying to Yale, which is like gray and dreary and like I don't know, like it's not like the most beautiful campus in the world.
Yeah, that's yeah. Looking into it is really, really big. Like I can't even emphasize that enough. Like doing your research. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the doing it both on the front end and then as you continue to do the process, I also see students sometimes their college list becomes like a blood contract where they've like done the spreadsheet and they have like their 12 must apply schools and they don't budge from it. And did your list evolve at all? Like you said you excluded Pepperdine, for example, but what was your process of like adding and removing schools from your list?
So I won't lie, I did start by Googling top 20 business schools in America, but I looked at them and I went, okay, the biggest thing again, I was thinking of in terms of, my future med school, debt, all that. So when I applied, I went, which of these is going to be feasible for me to pay? And I was like, which of these is going to even come close to UT? Like, it doesn't have to equal UT, like, but at least somewhere near. And so I looked at them and I went, okay, like for example, Brown was on my original list and I looked into it and they don't give, they only give need-based aid. And I didn't think that honestly that was going to like it wasn't going to come down to UT's cost. So I took that one off. And that was definitely like finances honestly was probably like the biggest like way for me to cut down my list. Like that was the number one. And then I didn't even pay attention to area of the country, honestly, because I didn't know where I wanted to move. So that wasn't a big deal for me. I definitely also looked at, obviously, academics. That was one of the main criteria as well. Like, oh, also, another thing is supplements. Oh my gosh. I looked at Stanford supplements.
Yeah,
And
it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare of an application.
Stanford was like 11 essays or something like that. And like, okay, maybe not every essay is like 500 words, but you realize that like Stanford has the elite of the elite. So if you're writing something for them, like you need to make sure that it's a good essay. And so I looked at their supplements and I went, you know what, this is going to take a lot of time. I'm probably not going to get very much money from them. It's not going to be, anywhere close to UT. And even though it's like an excellent school, I was like, this isn't for me. So I just took that one off.
Mm.
So, and then again, like the why us, that also really helped me narrow it down. I'll just say it, like Northwestern, I was looking at that one and they had like a why us essay and they didn't even have like a business school. So I was majoring in econ and I was like, never mind. So that was another one. And then let's see, what else, how else did I narrow it down? I think my original list had so many. And also my parents. I asked my parents. Like, I was gonna apply to UMich, and my dad said no because he was like, I don't think you would like the like weather and like the environment up there. So, and he didn't necessarily like the location as well. Like, not like like not Ann Arbor, but just like in the Midwest in
Yeah,
general.
sure.
I think my parents want me to either like Texas or like East West Coast, because my dad like used to live in the Midwest, so like he has knowledge of like,
Mm.
he was like, you know what, you wouldn't like it, because I'm more of like a city type person. So that's another thing. Like some of the colleges are in like small towns versus big towns, and I think you need to really see if that's for you.
Like
Like for me,
Dartmouth, for example, is like way in the middle of nowhere, even though it has a really good business school.
yeah, exactly. Like just like certain ones you'll be like, wow, this is like I don't know, like all the ones I was looking at were like in the middle of cities, like LA, Boston, Austin. Like those are all very like big areas, and I would be fine to moving to any three. Maybe not Boston because of the weather, but like looking at like, do I want to stay at like, the only one I can think of right now is A&M, which is like a city within like most people in College Station are from A&M, and if that's your jam, like go for it. Like you should look into those colleges. But for me, like I like more of like a city vibe, so that's what I also looked into. And I think that was a good way for me to eliminate some of them, because a lot of them are located in just really small like niche areas for their college specifically. And um, yeah. Oh, another thing, USC. Um, oh wait, no, never mind. That was irrelevant. But yeah, so like big versus small city. That was another thing.
Yeah, I like the on the front end how you're filtering for cost. This year I'm going to be a little more firm with families. Last year I started where they will come to me and they'll say, "Help us find like the best university that can also give us scholarships." And it's like, well, like Brown isn't going to give you a scholarship on merit, like these you're going to have a trade-off in terms of they're going to have some exceptions like USC where it's a great school that also does give pretty good scholarships, but oftentimes it's like a sliding scale. So what you're sacrificing potential quality, you're increasing with your potential to get scholarships. And especially I think the California system schools like Berkeley and LA, it's like it's full cost. If you're out of state, like you can just assume. So I'm just telling families point blank, like unless you guys have got $250,000 laying around and you don't have any kids in the pipeline, and
Yeah.
you're again like, what's the added value of a Berkeley or Los Angeles over UT Austin? Um, it is super hard to justify. And so the California system in particular is one that I see a lot of students on the front end, like it's like spring junior year, fall senior year, and they're, oh, I'm going to apply to all the California schools. And I haven't had a single client that has even seriously looked into going to Berkeley or Los Angeles. And that's for business. That's for engineering, electrical engineering, computer science. That's, these really top programs. And at the end of the day, it's just so hard to justify even regular admission to UT Austin over some of these other programs. And so it's, yeah, so this year I'm definitely going to be more like both realistic in terms of cost, but also just academics, right? Like you're not going to get into Stanford if you're outside the top 5% and you have a 32 on the ACT. Like I don't care. It's just not going to happen. I mean, for 999 kids out of 1,000 in that pool of students. And so I think this process of just getting it manageable and then also be willing to like say, okay, I don't have time for that in November senior year to do this 2,000 words worth of supplements for Stanford.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And like that's another thing. Wait, I completely lost my train of thought. Sorry, one sec.
that's okay.
What were we just talking about?
Just about the college list and how it continues to evolve and yeah, just the front end filters.
Yeah, I had something I was gonna say, but I forgot. Sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, yeah.
Cool. I'll ask you maybe one more question and then we can start to wrap this up. What's something you did? You can frame it two ways. Something you did freshman or sophomore year that you wish you had done more of or less of, or what advice would you give to your freshman high school self?
Focus on doing what you love, because you will put effort into where your heart is. Because I think I had a lot of activities on my resume, and don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing. Like it's not bad to like, explore, but I did like, certain things that I'm like, I could have spent this time working on other stuff, maybe like that was more tuned to what I wanted to do. Um, I probably shouldn't say exactly what, but there was just a few organizations that I joined, and I'm glad that I joined them because I think it taught me to, do what you love and love what you do. There's nothing forcing you to like join stuff that you're going to waste your time in. So try to explore, but also focus in on what you're passionate about, because essentially that's where you're going to want to work for the rest of your life. If you're going to do something that you're not passionate about, you're not going to be happy, and you have to spend, at least 40, maybe even upward to, in investment banking, they do like 100 hours a week. Like you're going to have to do like a lot. You're going to spend so much time dedicated to that one thing that you're going to want to make sure that it's something you actually like. Also, doing like maybe a little bit more over the summer. I think I probably maybe a little bit more. But yeah, I think definitely just following like where your gut tells what your gut tells you want to do, and just following through with that and channeling your energy to doing that. I think that's probably what I would tell myself.
Well, that's a perfect note to end on, Ishika. I appreciate you taking the time and joining me today for a really interesting conversation. And maybe we'll circle back in a year or two and see where your journey has taken you. I'm really curious to see where you end up and how you end up doing, and if any changes happen along the way. So maybe if you're interested, we could have another chat sometime down the
Yeah.
road.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to decide by the end of freshman year about med versus finance. So we're gonna see about that. But I hope I can make a decision in the next year.
That's okay. You've got time to figure it out, right? I mean, just as you say, follow your heart. And yeah, I wish you a smooth transition to UT amid all of the uncertainty, and hope you have an enjoyable summer.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.